सिर्फ खेती के ऊपर डिपेंड रह के संभल नहीं हो सकता।
If we could once again acknowledge the contribution of TVE and all the people who participated in the production of this movie. Thank you very much. It's my privilege now to introduce Ms. Florence Tinguely Mettli. She is the Charge d'Affaires at the Embassy of Switzerland here. Her commitment to issues of environment and development is well known. In previous roles held during her distinguished career as a diplomat, as counselor at the Swiss Embassy in Kenya, she was permanent representative to the United Nations Environment Programme. She's also been responsible for the Swiss government section for international organizations and host country policy, and in Beijing was responsible for the culture, press and education portfolio. Ms. Tinguely Mettli has degrees in Latin and Science, Economics and European Studies. May I request you now to please share your thoughts with us.
Thank you. Your Excellency, Honorable Minister Jairam Ramesh, Honorable Professor Swaminathan, Member of Parliament and Chairman of the Swaminathan Research Foundation, very distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is a great honor and a privilege for me to be present today in this important event. And it is a special pride for my country to be associated to the project of Professor Swaminathan, whom we highly regard, and his research foundation, in order to give a floor to the voices from the grassroots and know better the reality and of the ones directly affected by the climate change. I would like to thank His Excellency Minister Ramesh for his participating in today's event, which shows his leadership and commitment in linking all levels of stakeholders in order to determine the different actions and policies to fight or adapt to climate change. Indeed, I couldn't personally welcome more the approach followed by India in the process initiated with this project for defining your policies and actions. As it has been said previously, before being assigned to the Swiss Embassy in New Delhi, I was representing Switzerland during 4 years at UNEP, the United Nations Environment Programme based in Nairobi. And I do remember then when we had to discuss and push for the positions of our capital to come through, too often we were really concerned as diplomats of keeping touch with the reality and of the impact of our decisions would have. Therefore, I believe that the reality check made by the National Policy Dialogue on Climate Change is absolutely necessary and of great value. And to be frank, I'm here to learn. All the knowledge and expertise which will be presented and discussed, debated today will benefit, of course, India primarily, but not only. Climate change, as we all know, is affecting all our countries without any exception. And the result of your important national policy dialogue today will impact on other countries tomorrow. We see here a great potential for South-South cooperation and knowledge sharing, which Switzerland welcomes and supports. Since many years, Switzerland and India have shared a very close and strategic relationship in many areas, and especially in the field of environment. Climate change is indeed a great concern to the Swiss citizen, and we are therefore strengthening our bilateral cooperation with India on issues of common interest, namely adaptation to climate change, energy efficiency, and food security. Let me mention also a promising collaboration which is being developed now in the field of glaciers for monitoring and exchange of expertise. We do hope that the Swiss-Indian partnership will also be an asset for a fruitful and effective dialogue in international fora, like the high-level panel on climate change called by the Secretary General of the United Nations, where Minister Ramesh is also taking part with our Minister of Foreign Affairs and other fora. I wish you very fruitful discussion during these days, and I thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Ms. Tingweli Matli. We will make a small addition to this morning's agenda now, in the belief that it would be useful and interesting for all of us to take a peek into the process that the National Policy Dialogue on Climate Change Actions has followed during the course of the year. I'd like to request your attention for the next 5 minutes. This will be shared by Professor Swaminathan and the Head of Climate Change at SDC in India, Dr. Gerolf Weigel. Kerry?
High-level sustainability panel, not climate change panel.
He's the head of climate change.
And you all want to make it climate change. You were in Beijing also before.
I was in Beijing, yeah.
Fantastic.
Honorable Minister of Environment and Forest, Mr. Jairam Ramesh, Honorable Professor Swaminathan, Ms. Florence Tingweli, distinguished participants. It's a great pleasure to give you a quick overview of this process. The special aspects of this process is that it was designed very consciously not to create parallel structures, but to really build on what is there, what the policies, the organizations, and so on. So what I show, the architecture of this process, is very much geared towards, the previous slide please, geared towards, as it was said, linking the voices and lessons from grassroots to policy debate, to science, knowledge sharing, and really in a two-way process, not in a one-way process. And then next, we tried to put that in a matrix. This was designed by the steering group of the organizations that are listed here. The steering group, just at the outset of the process, was thinking how best do it. And so it was decided to go stepwise, start immediately with collecting voices from the ground. What you saw is only a few glimpses of that. It was really hundreds of voices, and it was digested during that process. There has been a series of events which were all interlinked. It all started with the conference on biodiversity, or in the context of conference of biodiversity in Chennai, by the Swaminathan Foundation, and the first real exchange between grassroots level perspectives and policymakers and researchers from all over the countries took place in a workshop organized by Development Alternatives in Bundelkhand. The results from that workshop were further digested, condensed into a paper, and further voices from the ground were added. And it all was discussed again in a highly interactive debate and reflection and analysis in the Pune workshop in July.
I think it's worthwhile.
And we forced really ourselves to first listen to these voices from the ground and then only start the debate from the policy side. So it was a very productive interaction. And these aspects, the main conclusions were again condensed in a working paper which was shared with the wider climate change community on the platform of the UNDP Solution Exchange. And just this week, there was the first part of this important final stage of the National Policy Dialogue on climate change in Chennai. Many of you, or several of you, have been there in that workshop. And through hard works, even into the night, action plan was developed. This action plan will be presented this afternoon. You will see, of course, only the major headlines of the action plan. There's much more substance behind, and that will be available on the web later on. In a few days, we will give you the link where all this detailed information will be available for the further follow-up. It's also the idea that this action plan will hopefully flow into ongoing processes. It's really, and it's very important to say, this is not to replace any other process. India has a marvelous set of strategies, of policies, of institutions. It's a unique dedication to really go for implementation. So this process is rather to enrich the process and to help the implementation through the specific focus on linking grassroots to policy. And just next, please. No, you can skip that. This paper is with all of you in your folder. That is only a summary. There will be a more detailed report available. And also, I would like to just mention selectively two side products of this process. One was that we asked an organization to really once make a compendium, a list of all the agricultural institutions in semi-arid India dealing with climate change and agriculture. It's only a start. It will be in an interactive form on the web to grow further. Next. We also, yes, that is the publication. It's not here. It's you have seen. You can get copies. We did a survey of all the major existing web pages dealing with climate change in India. What you see in the publication is a first start. It will be interactively on the web, and the idea is to really invite everybody to add, so that it's a service to the climate change community to find quickly the relevant web pages. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Weigel. Professor Swaminathan, is there anything you'd like to add at this stage? To the process. Okay. Yeah. We would also like to take advantage of this occasion and this August gathering to release a publication that has been produced by the MS Swaminathan Foundation as an outcome of, again, another intensive process which pertained to the community management of agrobiodiversity in an era of climate change. It is the result of 3 state-level consultations and consequent declarations. May I now request the Honorable Minister for Environment and Forests to please release these publications.
Close packaging.
For you next time a Swiss knife.
Got it. great deal of interest now. Particularly on the gene banks. Very.
Thank you, sir. The publications will be available for all participants later in the day. Thank you very much once again. It's now once again a rare privilege and honor for me to introduce our next speaker, the Honorable Minister for Environment and Forests, Sri Jairam Ramesh. The Honorable Minister may not remember, but the last time we were together was way back in 1989 at the India Quiz, a television contest which tested our general knowledge. We were in opposing teams for 2 rounds, and needless to say, his team beat my team on both occasions. So I just thought might bring that up. Sri Jairam Ramesh is the Union Minister of the State for Environment and Forests. He's a mechanical engineer by qualification and a renowned economist by experience. Sri Ramesh has served the Government of India and different states in several capacities as advisor and economic advisor. Sri Ramesh comes with a wealth of experience, having been advisor to the Finance Minister, to the Deputy Chairman of the Planning Commission, and to the Prime Minister, apart from serving other economic departments of the Union Government. He has been entrusted with numerous special assignments like reorganizing India's international trade agencies and implementing the technology missions, reorganizing the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research, and analyzing energy policy for the country. Sri Ramesh has authored a number of key government reports in areas as diverse as energy, technology, capital goods, industrial policy, and telecom. He was a key player in the team that formulated and implemented India's economic reforms in 1991 and 1997. He writes a widely read column on economics and public policy called Kautilya in the Times of India. Sri Ramesh has also anchored a number of popular television programs on business and the economy, including Business Breakfast and Crossfire. He has authored 2 books and is an avid reader with continued interest in music. Sri Ramesh studied public management at Carnegie Mellon University. He thereafter spent a year at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology studying technology policy, economics, engineering, and management as part of the newly established Interdisciplinary Technology Policy Program. In 2001, the Indian Institute of Technology, Mumbai, presented Sri Ramesh with their Distinguished Alumnus Award. May I invite you, sir, to share your thoughts with this gathering.
Respected Dr. Swaminathan, Madam Florence Matley, ladies and gentlemen. I'm delighted to be here for what is truly a unique exercise. The National Action Plan on Climate Change was an action plan put together by a large number of experts sitting in Delhi, thinking that they knew what the country knows best for climate change. Whereas today we are actually reverting the process and putting together the elements of a plan based on the daily experiences of people and communities who are actually experiencing the effects of climate change. And I think the challenge for us is really to integrate this top-down National Action Plan on Climate Change with this exercise that you have started, which you have initiated, a process by which you are putting together the shared experiences of communities to the impacts of climate change, and from that deriving experiences and lessons for what public policy should be doing. We initiated a similar exercise in our ministry a couple of months ago on the Himalayan ecosystem. Concerned with the retreat of the Himalayan glaciers, what we did in our ministry was to put together a manual of best practices, governance for mountain communities, for hill communities, and covering diverse sectors like agriculture, water, energy, tourism, variety of sectors, and we bought it out a couple of months ago. It was called GSHE, Governance for Sustainable Himalayan Ecosystem. And the she was very deliberate because it's in the Himalayan ecosystem, as you will know, it's the women who really are at the core of managing local ecosystems. Going back, if you remember, to the Chipko movement in the mid-70s. We started that exercise, and it is my intention that we carry this forward. We have started a similar exercise in parts of the Northeast, and I'm very glad to see today in the short video clips an exercise that has been done in the semi-arid regions of the country, which clearly will be one of the most important areas going to be affected by climate change. India's approach to climate change has been somewhat paradoxical. We have taken the view that we are not part of the problem. We didn't cause the problem of global warming, and therefore we should sit back and wait for others to come up with solutions. That has generally been our approach to climate change. And in the last 15 months, my first task has been to shake us off the complacency and actually point to the fact that of all the countries in the world, India is going to be the most profoundly influenced and affected by climate change. Now, why do I say this? There's no country in the world which has multiple points of vulnerability that India has. And India has at least 4 major dimensions of vulnerability to climate change. First and foremost, of course, is the monsoon. In spite of the fact that we are now a fast-growing, services-led economy, the fact of the matter is that if you look over the last 50 years, almost 45% of the variation in our GDP has come from variations in rainfall alone. So if variations in rainfall still remains the single most important determinant of our economic growth, it's not our software exports to the United States that drives our economic growth. It's really the monsoon, it's really the rainfall, the variations in the rainfall. Even if we assume that all our irrigation potential is going to be harnessed by the year 2020, something like 60% of India would still be rain-fed. 60% of India's cultivated area would still be rain-fed. So this is the first dimension, the fact that our agriculture, and not just our agriculture, our prosperity, our rural prosperity, and by its multiplier effects, industrial growth as well, is so very fundamentally influenced by variations in rainfall that we need to be concerned about the impact of climate change on monsoon patterns. The second point of vulnerability, as Dr. Swaminathan has said, is on the rise in mean sea levels. Almost 250 to 300 million people of our country live in the coastal areas along peninsular India, along a 7,000 kilometer long coastline, who are going to be very, very significantly impacted by what happens to mean sea levels. And if there is one robust scientific conclusion that can be reached after 20 years of research on climate change, the one thing on which there is no controversy is the rise in mean sea levels. Now, people in Maldives are worried about what is going to happen to Maldives after rise in mean sea levels. Bangladesh is worried. The Solomon Islands, the small island states are all worried. But these are countries, barring Bangladesh, with populations which are not very, very large. They're small population countries. But just imagine, we are a country where 250 million people are going to be affected by the rise in mean sea levels. That's why there is an international association of countries, 43 countries, called the Association of Small Island States. And I half jokingly tell them that India is a collection of AOC's countries. We are a collection of Maldives and Bangladeshs, so we are as much going to be affected by the rise in mean sea levels as Maldives or Bangladesh or some of these Pacific islands. So this is the second area of vulnerability. The third area of vulnerability is what happens to water security from the melting of the glaciers. The water security, and again the livelihood security of almost over 500 million people, and if you include Pakistan, Nepal, Bhutan, Bangladesh, we are talking of a population of almost 1 billion people who are going to be dependent on or influenced by what is going to happen to the health of the Himalayan glaciers and the runoff into the rivers that depend on these glaciers. Now, the science of melting has been controversial. So I don't want to get into the debate on what the IPCC said, what the IPCC didn't say. But the fact of the matter is that the health of the glaciers is a cause for great concern. Most Himalayan glaciers are indeed melting, are indeed retreating. There are some glaciers, of course, that are actually advancing. And a good example of that is the Siachen Glacier. There are some glaciers where the rate of retreat is declining. It's declining, but the rate of retreat is declining. And a good example of that is the Gangotri Glacier. But most studies that we have carried out do reveal that the rate of retreat is large enough for us to be worried. It's not as large as the European glaciers. It's not as alarming as the European glaciers, and part of the problem is people extrapolate from what is happening in the European glaciers and write epitaphs for the Himalayan glaciers, whereas there is a fundamental difference between the two, and the difference being that the snout of the Himalayan glaciers, the lowest point of the Himalayan glaciers, is at least 3,000 meters above sea level, unlike the Arctic glaciers which are at the sea level. But nevertheless, the behavior of the glaciers, the health of the glaciers, the debris, the snow cover, they're all matters of great concern for us. And as I said again, this adds a point of great vulnerability for us. The fourth dimension of vulnerability for India comes from the confluence of her great mineral wealth with her significant forest cover. If you look at the map of India, and if you plot the areas of mineral wealth, particularly coal, iron ore, and you see where the forest areas are, there's a one-to-one mapping. So the more coal you're going to use, the more iron ore you're going to use, the more forests you're going to destroy. And the more forests you're going to destroy, the more you're going to contribute to greenhouse gas emissions. Now, I can't think of any country in the world which has